Hi everyone, my name is Laura B, aka Twitter user at whytikitaze, which you probably already know if you're watching this video. And if you're watching this video, you probably know that I'm a huge fan of tokusatsu, and especially Kamen Rider. I show this love in a lot of ways, like making memes, uploading covers of theme songs and the like, making silly little TikToks, and writing fanfiction. But I've been thinking recently about doing more with the material that tokusatsu presents to me, and that's when my brain landed on video essays. I think there's a lot more to talk about thematically and from a storytelling perspective than I can usually portray through my regular formats, so thanks to an Amazon gift card that my mom gave me, here we are. Now, I wouldn't want to just jump into analysis without y'all knowing what I think of the shows that I'm going to talk about, and people have this really bizarre habit of seeing me say something about a show and then just explaining it to me like I didn't watch it. So I figured I'd start this era of my YouTube channel with a top 10. My top 10 tokusatsu series that I've finished and remember well, and also as of December 23rd, 2024, because that's when Past Laura started writing the script. Hi Past Laura!
Hi Future Laura!
That means from every season of Power Rangers, 8 seasons of Super Sentai, 1 season of Ultraman, 18 seasons of Kamen Rider, and 2 seasons of the Chosation trilogy, I've selected 10 shows that are probably going to explain a lot about my taste in things. In order to decide on a top 10, I put all of those in a bias order that didn't allow any ties. Just one or the other, straight sorting them. The only barometer is how much I like them. I'm sure that objective quality exists, but what I'm considering is if I like them or not. That means you and I will probably disagree on a lot of these, and that's okay. Just please, be normal about it. That's all I'm asking, just chill and normal, even if you disagree. Also, this video will contain spoilers, like a lot of them, probably. So if you don't want to be spoiled and you haven't seen a season that I mentioned, go ahead and skip ahead, I will not judge you. So, with that in mind, here it is. My personal favorite top 10 tokusatsu shows. Let's go! We're counting down!
Number 10.
I first watched this season of Kamen Rider in spring of 2024 with an extremely dear friend of mine. I'd actually recommended it to her before I'd seen it based on a memory of a couple episodes I'd watched during what I now call the bad times, and just general vibes. Said friend is now said season's biggest fan with ease, so called it. And getting to watch it with her, I got to see exactly why she fell in love with it. And before I knew it, I was falling in love with it too. And now, my 10th favorite tokusatsu series of all time is Kamen Rider Saber! Kamen Rider Saber is, at its core, a show about stories, how they link us together, how they help us connect with each other, and how it's words that really do save this world. Naturally, that theme would resonate with me, because I'm a writer, but I also feel like it's a really beautiful theme to think about in the context of being a fan of pretty much anything that has a story at all. Art, in every form it takes, is not just a luxury for those who can afford it. It's how humans survive even in the darkest times. And considering the fact that Saber aired in late 2020, yeah, times were pretty damn dark for everyone. But Saber is also about how it's always darkest before dawn. These characters go through it. And by it, of course, I mean the death loop. People go through the death loop. And also through many other challenges, such as being in love with someone who doesn't love you back, making the choice to go against everything you've ever known, writer's block, insane dragon times, and again, the death loop. If there's a struggle, the characters of Kamen Rider Saber go through it. But at the end of the day, they don't just go through it, they get through it using the power of stories. I think that's incredibly poetic. I'm not the only person whose life was saved by a season of Kamen Rider, after all. If I'd watched this in full back when it aired, I think it could have taken me out of that dark place a lot sooner. That's how powerful Saber's message is to me. Now, my favorite Saber character ended up being Akamichi Ren. I'm weak for a guy experiencing self-loathing, and also Flamesubs made the hilarious and not inaccurate choice to translate this Toma line as, "You have a crush on Kento, don't you?" And it was kind of over for me then. And he's a ninja. I love ninjas. To this day, I don't understand why I love ninjas, but I do. That said, Kamiyama Toma is one of the most incredible protagonists in Kamen Rider, and I wish his books were real so I could read them. I think the Primitive Dragon mini-arc is the best showcase of Toma's appeal. My aforementioned friend, Ki, wrote a really good analysis of some of it on her Tumblr, which I'll link to in the description if you want to check it out, which you should, but to put it simply, I can't not cry when even looking at pictures of episode 27. It all comes back to stories, and the one Toma writes here touches me just thinking about it. Stories are what remind us we're not alone. They're what give us hope when we need it the most, and they teach us to keep hoping no matter what the odds may be. Saber also just has a bunch of stuff I think is really cool and scratches what I call my 12-year-old boy brain. I love swords. Swords will make not one, not two, but several appearances on this list. One day, I swear to God, Fusoken Hayate is going to be mine. And the suit design, I don't care what anyone says. Cross Saber is one of the most gorgeous final forms I've ever seen, and I want to have nails inspired by it like yesterday. I love all of Espada's suits too, especially his Arabiana Night form from Trio of Deep Sin, and then there's my boy Rintaro, who's all fuzzy. And don't get me started on Sabella, ooh, that belt noise! Where was I? And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Saber's music. Rewrite the Story is one of the most epic toku songs ever. The opening theme and the ending theme are both catchy as hell, and Bittersweet from Trio of Deep Sin is like one of the prettiest, most appropriate to play at a coffee shop songs I've ever heard. But I have to say, my favorite song from Saber is Will Save Us. Being a Ren fan, like I said, episode 43 is incredibly important to me, and the lyrics describe his struggles so well. I haven't finished Outsiders, but I hope it ends with Ren and Desast being together for the rest of forever. And if it's not, don't say anything. For this specific story, I'll be deciding how it ends. Thank you very much. Anyway, to wrap things up, I genuinely think Saber will resonate you if you've ever been moved by any story ever. And if you somehow haven't, give it a shot anyway. There's cool swords. And it's probably going to be a story that moves you, especially if you find yourself going through some tough times. After all, what Saber teaches us is that no matter how bad things can get, or how lost you might be, you can always write yourself a happy ending.
Number 9.
Back when I was in my senior year of high school, my special interest in Power Rangers came back hard. And instead of doing anything to provide a future for myself or become a productive member of society, I watched a lot of Sentai as a result of going down some rabbit holes. I lost a lot of these shows to the void, so being able to remember one is a pretty high badge of honor. And loving one as much as I still do is an even higher one. That's why my 9th favorite tokusatsu series is... Kaizoku Sentai Gokaiger! I'm always weak for an anniversary season, apparently, and Gokaiger is, rightfully in my opinion, considered to be one of the greats. It doesn't matter if you know every single Sentai cameo, or if you were just like, let's go, space pirates, and dove in with no context whatsoever. You still get to experience this celebration of Super Sentai as a whole, and even if you don't know who all these past heroes are, you still learn, along with the Gokaiger team, just what being a Sentai means. You learn why the show lasted for so long, and why it's still so loved, all while experiencing a damn good season of it in the process. What else could you want? To explain what I mean, I think a really good example of this is in episode 50. The Gokaigers never set out to be a Sentai team, except Guy, I guess, and even then I wouldn't say it was a career goal exactly. It's more just kinda something that happened to him. Anyway, the crew goes out and meets people whose lives were changed by Super Sentai and by the Gokaigers themselves. These characters make us regular humans stronger, in-universe and out-of-universe, by showing us the power of doing what we can to protect others, even if it's scary. And the Gokaigers are very much included in that. And speaking of this team, my god, I love this team! Just an absolutely perfect 6-member lineup, no notes. Marv really has the charisma necessary to be the kind of character he is. To quote another show in this top 10, he really just has something that draws people to him. Joe is the perfect contrast to him, but his loyalty to Marv is so... I really hope they're married. And also he's Yamada Yuki, and I think Yamada Yuki is very pretty, so I like looking at him. If you're a Sentai fan at all, you'll definitely see yourself in Guy, who you will never make me hate. Luka is one of the most fun women in a Sentai ever, and also, if she wowed me, I'd let her. She also has one of the best, least traumatizing Christmas-focused episodes of any toku ever. And I love Doc. I love a guy who fixes things. But oh my god, my favorite Gokaiger is Gaim. Easily. It is not close. Episode 41 really shows why, I think. Gaim is the heart of the team, and without her, they'd probably fall apart. I love the fact that yes, She's a princess, but that doesn't mean that she's incapable or in need of protection. I love the fact that her role as the emotional center of the team is one that's not only treated seriously, but as a necessity. You take her out, the Gokaigers don't work. You can be extremely frilly and cute and still kick as much ass and be as important outside of that as everyone else. I love that. And does Gokaiger scratch my 12-year-old boy brain? Yeah, it does. First off, the goddamn galleon! It's really one of my favorite toku ships. Get it? But seriously, Gokaiger is a really cool mech design, and I love most of the designs for its forms based on other seasons. When I think about action in Gokaiger though, I think about Joe because he has so many cool sword moments, and I love me a cool sword, as I'm sure you can tell. His whole plot with Otto from Chosei Kantai Sazer X, Barazorg, it's good television, y'all. I also really love the Gokaiger suits themselves. They're just so perfectly piratey, you know? I'd love to cosplay Gaim someday, but alas, money. And while I have less to say about Gokaiger's music, Super Sentai Hero Getter is a banger, and the theme song makes me feel like I can do pretty much anything. So in conclusion, Gokaiger earned its place in my top 10 just by being a wonderful celebration of Sentai, while also being a damn enjoyable Sentai in its own right. I can turn on so many episodes and just smile or cry or point and go, wow, that's gay, Joe. Seriously, 11 and 12, changed my brain chemistry. And whether you're a longtime Sentai fan who somehow avoided watching it, or if you're someone who doesn't know anything about Sentai at all, it's incredibly likely that you'll walk out of Gokaiger appreciating the series as a whole even more. The space pirates will, in fact, save you.
Number 8.
This next series is one that I watched on the recommendation of a friend. It was my first foray into tokusatsu outside of the big three and Power Rangers, and I had no idea what to expect except for women. But I really like women, so I gave it a shot, and I am so glad I did. What I got was a truly insane ride through a crazy fun show. And now I'm proud to say that my 8th favorite tokusatsu series of all time is Choseishin Gransazer! Gransazer genuinely has everything you could possibly want in a tokusatsu. It's from 2003, but in a move that I find absolutely shocking, it treats its women like characters. It's a 12-person team, with 4 women on it. 4 of them, and they all feel well-developed and realistic. How wild is that? As it turns out, it's always been possible. Who'd have thought? Seriously, shout out to Mika, Ron, Ryoko, and Ai, because these 4 are absolutely amazing. All of them have storylines that have nothing to do with romance, and such storylines are given just as much depth as the ones starring the dudes. And if you're not a believer that there can be good heterosexual relationships in tokusatsu, let me tell ya, good straight people exist, and the key is to have good women. Tenma and Mika really stole my heart in an unexpected way. They're like every primary and secondary ship I like, but they're on the same tribe. Tribe mates, if you will. Oh my god, they were tribe mates. That said, my favorite Gransazer character? Ron. Saotome Ron had my whole heart from her debut episodes, where she does many things, such as successfully escape from a police car, Kamen Rider Gaim, and eventually jump a dude who's messing with her friend. She also has the power to make her Choseishin typical weird loner listen to her, and the endgame plot with her. This girl means the world to me. I love her. She is my girlfriend, and we are dating. I don't accept questions, thank you. But it's not just the women of Gransazer that earned it a spot on this list, although they are awesome. Maybe it's just because I've spent the last few years consuming almost nothing except for Rider and Sentai, but Gransazer really felt like a genuinely fresh and different take on a lot of tokusatsu tropes I've come to know and love. The fact that it's an alien invasion story at its core is so much fun, too. The different species and designs you end up seeing over the course of the show are all really cool. I really like the Impactors especially because they're basically Klingons in sunglasses, and that's badass. Also, they're gay. Also badass. And speaking of things that are badass, this is true for the entire Choseishin trilogy, but the kaiju and mech fights in Gransazer go so damn hard. You can really tell it's the studio behind Godzilla that made this show, because my god are the mech fights amazing. I think a really good example of this is in episode 41, which has some really cool cinematography, a sick giant robot fight, and some heated drama between men if you drift my catch. My favorite of these mechs is the Earth Tribe mech, Gransazer, because it's a tiger with guns on it. It's called Gransazer! That's so awesome. That's one of the coolest things in the entire history of cool things. I also really love the suits in Gransazer. Each tribe looks coherent, but different enough that you can easily tell who's who. And since I know a few things about astrology, I get to appreciate stuff such as Tenma using a bow and arrow as his main weapon. Because, like, he's Sagittarius, you know? And Sagittarius is the archer, so Tenma's an archer. They clevered it. And Gransazer isn't missing in terms of thematic depth either. By the end of the series, I think the message is pretty clear. Constant fighting only hurts people, regardless of if they're directly involved in the conflict or not, and the best solution we can aim for is one where the fighting stops. That said, that doesn't mean you can skimp on protecting others, or the amazing planet we're on. No matter how irritating humans can be, there are things and people worth keeping safe. And I just really like that. I like that in my shows. As for the music, I actually really want to highlight Gransazer's score, which has some really awesome guitar stuff going on. It's almost Power Rangers-esque, and that makes me really happy and nostalgic. And while Life Goes On and Kimi wo Tsureteiku were definitely growers, whenever I rewatch Gransazer episodes, you will be able to find me singing along to both. And god, I wish they were on streaming. Seriously, I have been able to find one song from the entire Chosation trilogy on streaming. One. And I'm not, like, saying that Reto Party Night isn't a banger, because it is, but, like, Life Goes On. Moichiro. Yume wo tsukamitai yo. So in conclusion, Gransazer was my first step out of mainstream tokusatsu, and it's a step that I am so glad I took. If anything, it makes me hold modern Big 3 toku to a higher standard. If this show, which might I remind you is from 2003, has this level of quality and well-written women, then the big budget studios have no excuse. If you want to branch out from mainstream tokusatsu, I genuinely think that Gransazer is a great place to start. It has everything you probably enjoy about other shows, and more, with its own special flavor that you just can't get anywhere else. Please, please, give Gransazer a shot and check out the rest of the trilogy too. You'll be glad you did.
Number 7.
So I actually started this season out of spite. See, if I feel enough spite about something, I can do anything, including write a 9-chapter, 40,000-word fanfiction, or cover Break the Chain from Kamen Rider Kiva. And because I was feeling spiteful about the previous season of Sentai, I decided I'd love the season that aired after it my whole heart, no matter what. Luckily, that wasn't difficult to accomplish because within seconds of meeting the Red, I fell in love with him hard. And that's why my 7th favorite tokusatsu show ever is... Osama Sentai King-Ohger! Seriously, all you need to know about how much I love Gira Husty is this tweet from my dear friend Honey, and also this chime-in from my best match Jack. They have me in 4K, as friends tend to do. Gira Husty, y'all, what did they put in this guy? He captivated me. He's easily my favorite Sentai Red ever, which is why I married him, and continue to be his biggest hype man to this day. Go, Gira! That's my evil king! For real though, King-Ohger's characters are absolutely wonderful. They're extremes in every direction, but that doesn't mean they aren't good rulers for their people. They're also all very different from each other, and that's precisely why the team works so well and is so interesting. It's quite literally 6 rulers coming together to maximize their joint slay. Aside from Gira, who is my husband by the way, I really want to shout out to my president Yamagast, who's straight up one of the coolest, most complex characters of the cast, and I kind of feel like he gets paid dust by the fandom. Anyway, I'll be the change I wish to see in the world eventually, but to avoid making this section too long, I'll keep it brief and say he's super cool. As a mixed person who has experienced the sometimes internal conflict between my cultures and also a writer, I relate to Jeremy, and as an adorable non-binary idol and children's show enthusiast, I relate to Rita. Himeno and Kaguragi I don't feel as strongly about, but that doesn't mean they aren't extremely well-realized and fascinating characters in their own right. But what makes King-Ohger stand out, and what made it such a fun experience to watch live, is its story. Most seasons of Sentai lean heavily into being episodic, which isn't a bad thing, but King-Ohger being as absurdly serialized as it is was something I'd straight up never really seen before from Sentai. Every Saturday night I was glued to my TV, or the Raws that just sort of mysteriously appear on my laptop. King-Ohger really hits the ground running from its first episode, and it just doesn't stop. I remember describing it to my dad as Game of Thrones for kids with giant bug robots, and honestly, King-Ohger's better. I have not seen Game of Thrones, I just know this to be true. After all, Game of Thrones probably isn't about how our differences are what make us stronger together, or how, yeah, our actions have consequences. And for the sake of the greater good, sometimes that means making some pretty serious sacrifices. But those sacrifices are worth it to make. I know a lot of the wider tokusatsu fandom had complaints about King-Ohger's CGI usage, but to me that stuff didn't even register. You write me a story as good and as engaging as this, you don't even have to remember to put the effects in, I'm seated. I can still remember my reactions to every plot twist and new reveal, and going back over the story now that I know all these twists and turns makes me appreciate how well foreshadowed they are. But also, like, honestly, CGI and whatever the collective opinion on it is aside, I genuinely think that King-Ohger created a really awesome world for itself. I love how distinct the countries are from each other and how each one has a unique culture. They feel very, very realized, and that's really impressive. And you know how I've mentioned swords a lot? Guess what? Swords! The Memorial Ohger caliber is straight up my current holy grail. It will be mine someday. I love this boppet sword, and I love the suits it allows the team to wear. Seriously, so clean! Side note, but I rarely have a man as my favorite member of a Sentai team, and if it is a man, it's usually a 6th, and specifically a gold. And so I fell so hard for Gira, and I was like, yes! Go Laura, you're breaking your old patterns. And then he got his upgrade. The Shugots themselves are also a really cool concept for Sentai mecha, and there's just something about these specific sentient/sapient mecha that kind of works for me in a way that I'm usually just neutral on. I love that they have a love triangle. I love that they have nicknames. I love that Gira is friends with them. Okay, I know I keep going back to Gira, but can you blame me? I'm in love with him. And to touch back on that aforementioned theme of actions having consequences and doing the right thing regardless, his moment doing that in episode 1 is really what sold me on him forever looking back. That speech he gives is burned into my memory, and Kuraran, Tsumaran, Kinikuran is just so ridiculously fun to say. And also, I love him. Watch Osama Sentai King-Ohger because for one thing, it's a great story with one hell of a message, but also, my husband is in this. Nepotism win, it's my list. Also, shout out to Usuba, who is my Glup Shido, and if you know what any of those words mean, then you're probably too online. Stream Kurage. Next up!
Number 6.
Speaking of my best match Jack, he'd been asking me to watch this show for about 2 years before I finally did it, thanks to a disease I caught after watching Senpai This Can't Be Love called wanting to look at Seto Toshige. I came out of it with not only a wife, but also a cat, and a disease where I can't stop thinking about it. I genuinely don't think that there's been a day since I started it that I haven't thought about it. This show will give you a disease. And also King-Ohger is here, so that's great. My 6th favorite tokusatsu show of all time is Kamen Rider Ex-Aid. I genuinely did not expect Ex-Aid to hit me as hard as it did, and neither did Jack, which I think is kind of hilarious. Ex-Aid is more than the sum of its parts, but also those parts are individually so good. The themes, the story, the music, the suits, the acting, it's all just fantastic. And for a series that got cut short and had some restraints around it, Yuya Takahashi kinda flourished. Maybe that's why Geats was so ass. To me, Ex-Aid is about how life, quite literally, isn't a game. Humans are squishy, fragile little creatures with brains that sometimes lead us down roads that aren't the best for us. You never know when a game over could come, for you or for anyone else. That, however, is precisely what makes life so precious and why it's worth fighting to protect. Even if it belongs to an insane, disgraced CEO and game developer turned bioterrorist. But the thing is, that isn't even the only message you can take from Ex-Aid. Stress, if left unchecked, will force your body to rest. Nobody can do anything all by themselves. Don't send children anthrax. Sometimes people get diseases and recover from them, but that doesn't mean that their life is going to be magically the same as it was before. Poppy Pipo Popo is the cutest in the world. And yes, that is a message. Don't at me. Well, to me, that was a message. Poppy Pipo Popo is, as you can probably tell, my favorite Ex-Aid character and also my wife who I am married to. She is not just the cutest in the world, but also the most powerful, and I love her very much. But my adoration and dedication to my beloved Poppy aside, I always love it when kaijins get to do good. I'm always weak for a sympathetic monster episode, and I hate it when kaijin are treated by the narrative as evil all the time. So while I wish it was her choice, I'm glad she gets to do good, and that she gets to live. She's so important to me. Now, my other favorite Ex-Aid character is much less of a fandom favorite, but he's precious to me in a different way. This is my cat. He is stupid, but he is my cat. Seriously though, Hiro's entire story is one about unprocessed grief and guilt, and I don't think it'll ever stop hitting me like not one but several writer kicks. People give him flack for being a bad boyfriend, and to that I say, yeah, He is. He knows that, and he probably spends at least one night a week wide awake, staring at the ceiling, just telling himself that over and over and over again. His desperate struggle to rid himself of the guilt he feels over that, versus respecting Saki's last wishes and doing the right thing as a doctor, was just, wow, absolutely amazing to watch. Seto Toshiki is just so good at crying. But really, the entire X8 cast is amazing. Even the characters I actively personally dislike, which, yes, are in here, I can still look at them objectively and not only see how X8's themes are reflected in them, but how taking even one out would stop the story from working. Emu, Taiga, Nico, Kiria, even Hiro's dad, they all have such huge places in my heart. Hell, even the spin-off content manages to be thematically relevant and still spin-off typical insane. Go Rider means the world to me for reasons that I'll elaborate on a little later, and the Pac-Man movie, the stuff with Takeru and Akari, just wow. Impeccable writing, folks. And though this may be something of a hot take, I like that it ends with game disease not being eradicated completely. Medical science is amazing, but these things take time, and I think it's important for kids to know that. But X8 isn't just absurdly well written. Let's talk about the soundtrack, because my god, the music of this show is so good. I've been a really big Miura Daichi fan since 2015, when Nate Wants to Battle covered his song It's the Right Time, but I somehow didn't know that he sang the X8 opening until the first few notes of X8 actually played. But when I did, it became my pre-work hype song for about a year straight. The insert songs, such as People Game, for example, which is by my beautiful wife, Papi Pipa Papa, are also so good. Check out Kaze no Mukoe by Kamen Rider Girls if you haven't already, by the way. In the score, I never thought I'd want to be in the club to a track called Medical Intern, but through X8, all things are possible. X8 also has some of the most gorgeous suits I've ever seen, with my favorites being Brave, Tattle, Legacy, and Poppy. But also Dangerous Zombie and Hyper Muteki X8. And the fight scenes are so good. One really good example of this is the fight between Parad and Emu in episode 39. Sometimes you just really have to beat a lesson into somebody. I also absolutely adore the Gamer Driver. I eventually plan on purchasing one for myself, though it'll be a ways out, cause wow, money. So, to conclude, X8 is an insane ride that doesn't let up when it starts punching, in a really good way. It sparked a lot of debate, and people have a lot of really strong opinions about it in all kinds of directions. And when you watch it, you'll understand why, because X8 is packed to the brim with things to have opinions about. I remember describing it as calorically dense when I was watching it, but man, those calories were absolutely delicious. I feel like I kind of lost the plot with that metaphor, but, you know, while we're talking about food...
Number 5.
I actually don't remember when I first watched this season. What I do remember is that I was a teenager, and I was so emotionally devastated by the ending that I didn't touch any Kamen Rider for years after. Revisiting it in 2023, though, it was like every reason I liked it was just affirmed, and if anything, as an adult, I can appreciate it on so many more levels than I used to. It's worth the hype, and for none of the reasons that you'd expect. That's why my 5th favorite tokusatsu show of all time is... Kamen Rider Gaim! It's often said that Gaim is dark and edgy, and I'm not gonna say that's not true to some degree, but I feel like that's a very surface level take on Gaim. For one thing, I never see a lot of discussion of Gaim as a coming-of-age story, which it straight up tells you that it is. From the very beginning, Kota wants to grow up and help his sister, and in true Bildungsroman fashion, the story focuses on exactly how that growing up happens to him, and how much of a bitch that growing up can be. And, because it's impossible not to, let's contrast this with Kaito, who keeps his childish, cynical worldview throughout the entire series. He quite literally does not grow up, and as a result, he's the way he is with all the tragedy and pain that causes. Sometimes growing up means making sacrifices, and sometimes that means you change, in ways that you can't go back from. But this ties into what I think is another theme of Gaim's that, again, is reflected very strongly in Kota and Kaito. Kota's worldview, one that believes that yes, you'll make mistakes but things will get better, is initially dismissed as childish, but in the end it's what wins over Kaito's cynicism. Growing up means making mistakes. You're gonna learn some things the hard way, and some things will just suck. But that doesn't mean things can't get better, or that you shouldn't keep trying through it. And as a matter of fact, humans have a pretty great track record of helping each other out. I see a lot of people dismiss Gaim as a shallow clone of Ryuki, which is an opinion, and one that more or less throws out the thought of discussing Gaim's themes altogether. And I also often see people focus on Gaim's power scaling and race to the top rather than the actual story it's trying to tell, but seriously, judge it on its own merits. It's got a lot of great messages and way more to say than it's given credit for. And I love Gaim's characters. Much like with Xaid, there's a Gaim character that I personally dislike extremely strongly, but that's also because I used to date somebody like them, and now I know that they're a distressingly accurate portrayal of that type of person, so props. I adore Zack and really all of Team Baron, but especially my Walnut Boy. Takatora is an incredibly complex character who's only made more fascinating by the spin-off content featuring him. Oren is an openly gay man in Kamen Rider, and not only is his sexual orientation treated relatively seriously, it's actually relevant to the plot, and also, he can and will kick your ass. It's pretty damn impressive for 2013. But in the end, my favorite Gaim characters are the main trio, Kota, Kaito, and Mai. Kota, aside from being a man who I have an immense crush on, really does grow so much throughout the course of the series, and he never stops believing that there's a better way despite all the darkness and horrible things he goes through, and despite the mistakes he makes. Kaito, like I said earlier, does not grow and change. Even when he learns about the kind of strength that Kota and Mai have, until his dying breaths, he doesn't believe it's enough to make a better world. And it just plays out in such a tragic way that I can't help but absolutely adore him. It's also why I like Kamen Sentai Go Rider so much. It gives him character development that makes sense and doesn't feel out of place. And also he officially gets to be a Kamen Rider. I'm proud of you, Banana Boy. As for Mai, people don't like the way that Mai gets treated in Gaim's narrative, and honestly, I get it. I've thought about it a lot. That said, while I'm not gonna get into it in this specific video, if you look at my story from a Watsonian perspective, it is not as bad as people say it is. I swear. In fact, Mai's kind of the emotional center of Gaim, and if you dismiss her impact on the story based on how the narrative treats her, you're missing out. Gaim also has one of the most clever concepts for gimmick items in Rider, I don't care. If you can think of a fruit, you can think of a lock seed, and boom, instant OC. The design of the Sengoku driver is so clean too. It was my dream for years to have one, and also all the Team Baron lock seeds, cause I'm Team Baron till I die. So, I made it happen. And the suit design in Gaim is absolutely gorgeous. I love the contrast between Gaim Kiwami and Lord Baron especially. The god and Satan symbolism is so delicious. And Gaim's music? Gaim has awesome music. Gaim has my single favorite tokusatsu song of all time, Rambu Escalation, which I could probably dissect line by line to explain how amazing it is. It highlights Kota and Kaito's contrast, yes, but also the ways that they're similar, and I feel like listening to it and really understanding it helps you understand these characters so much. Teppen Star from the Gaim Winter movie, also known as the song that Team Gaim dances to all the time, is really damn catchy, and EXA is so awesome. But I'm not going to talk about Gaim's music and not talk about Just Live More. That guitar, those strings, those drums, got it move, whoa, gets me hyped up every time. So, in conclusion, Kamen Rider Gaim gets a lot of hype, and that hype is deserved and then some. Just probably not for the reasons it deserves to be hyped. You never forget your first rider, so it's not like Gaim would ever not be special to me, but I genuinely believe it has one of the best stories in Kamen Rider. Maybe it's similar to what came before it, and yeah, there's a lot of focus on who will be the one who gets the golden fruit. But there's a lot more to my fruit show than that. Give it a chance, and you might find a lot more than you expect.
Number 4.
I genuinely did not know anything about the public opinion of this season when I watched it. I had no clue what people thought about it, and just had the ride of my life throughout time and the history of a series that I genuinely love so much. And then I found out that the popular opinion is that it's bad, and I was like, really? But, like I said, I am always weak for an anniversary season. That's why my fourth favorite tokusatsu show is... Kamen Rider Z-O! Seriously, to me, Z-O is maybe the most so good if you don't have a little voice in your ear telling you it's bad series, like, of anything. Ever. Namely because I had no such voice in my ear, and I loved this show. Z-O was my reward for watching the rest of Heisei Phase 2, and also Decade, and yeah, it felt like a reward. I watched it in a week, which is absurdly fast by my standards because I was just that hooked on it. I didn't even realize people could dislike it. It's true that Z-O has a lot of cameos from writers past, but I never felt like the legends distracted or took away attention from the main characters. In fact, one of my favorite parts of Z-O is watching Sogo grow and develop as a character precisely because of his interactions with the legend writers. It's thanks to Eiji and Koda that he learns to trust others and that he can't do everything by himself. It's thanks to Shinji and Tsukasa that Sogo acknowledges that yes, he has the potential to become Omazeo. Even the Forze and Fize episodes do a wonderful job of showing how lonely Sogo is before Gates and Tsukiyomi come into his life. And in the end, it's those lessons, and the ones that Sogo learns from his new friends too, that drive Sogo to make his new world and give everyone peace. And Sogo as a character? He's one of my favorite primary writers ever, second only to the character in the #1 spot on this list. Naturally, I, a person who had trouble making friends for a long time and clung to an unrealistic dream to cope with that loneliness, would relate to him. But I really think his journey to becoming someone who can be a good king is just wonderful to watch. And I think it's important to remind kids that everyone has the capacity to be really awful, and that not acknowledging this is precisely what makes those parts of ourselves grow and hurt others. In this age of internet discourse and arguments with strangers online, it's really easy to default to thinking of yourself as innocent and morally correct 100% all the time, and that lets you be as cruel as you want without feeling anything. As much as it can suck to face that reality, you can't become a better person if you don't own up to your dark side too. But Sogo's not the only character I walked out of Zio feeling fond of. Gates gets called flip-floppy a lot, or in his own words, a tsundere. But I think even that makes sense when you remember he's an 18-year-old boy who's developing a crush for the first time. That's not canon? Yeah, yes it is. Yes it is. I've seen Zio, like, so many times. I think Gates' behavior makes a lot of sense when you remember he's an 18-year-old boy who's developing a crush for the first time. And developing a crush on the guy that destroyed the world and personally killed several friends of yours has gotta make your heart kinda flip-floppy. So, while this Shadow the Hedgehog of a secondary writer is certainly a secondary writer, he makes sense to me, and he's fun to make fun of, so I'm here for it. And of course, I love Tsukiyomi. I do in fact wish she'd gotten to be a writer for more than one episode, but also the fact that the entire storyline of Zio hinges on the fact that her brother is a misogynist is both funny, and yeah, that is kind of how life works sometimes. She's an incredible female lead who has such a wonderful story, especially in the Akito tribute episodes. And as someone who is cursed with a crush on Karuya Tsukasa, I like looking at him. And Waz is so much fun. You just gotta iwae sometimes, y'all. Iwae! Zio also has amazing music. Aside from the absolutely gorgeous score, we have Overquartzer, which is a banger that never fails to hype me up. My boy Issa wouldn't let me down. Even the spin-offs have great music. Alive Alive Neo is worth watching Rider Time Ryuki for, and Izanagi from Shinobi is awesome. Though I'm probably biased because, like I said, I love ninjas. I also absolutely adore Zio Toki no Oja, Sogo's character song. It's motivational, but there's also this sense of like... You can tell Sogo has the power to become Omazeo, even though the lyrics are so motivational and nice, you know? I think it's really well written. And Zio suits! I love Zio suits. Gransazer is my favorite, as you can tell by this shirt I made about it, but I also want to shout out Waz, and his banger standby loop, and Tsukiyomi. Gates' Revive is also gorgeous, especially in Sonic the Hedgehog mode. Nice job, everyone on the Zio team. So, to wrap this section up, I didn't know people didn't like Zio, and I still don't know why people don't like it. What I got from it is a really wonderful journey that celebrates Kamen Rider and the lessons it teaches us, while also really going deep into the using the powers of evil to do good theme that's a staple of the franchise. The fact that the evil in question is Sogo himself makes his quest to not become that evil so delicious to watch. I love Kamen Rider, and Zio loves Kamen Rider too. They can never make me hate it.
Number 3.
I don't remember why I decided to watch this season. I think it was so I could have more context for its crossover with its superhero time partner, which I adored even before I knew what was going on in the Sentai-related parts of it. But I am so glad I did, because now it's my favorite season of Sentai, bar none. Something about it just hit with me in a way that I really didn't expect it to. But it sure did, and now it's special to me. My third favorite tokusatsu show of all time is... Resha Sentai Toqger! I think it's really interesting that Toqger and Gaim air together, because if you ask me, they have a very similar theme. Growing up and when you can't keep being a child. Of course, Toqger is also about the power of imagination, and we'll get to that, but the Toqgers are thrown into a situation where they quite literally can't keep being children. Physically, anyway. And I do think it's sort of terrifying in an, if you think about it too much, it gets super messed up sort of way, that these literal kids had to go through so much just to go home. But said kids did end up getting there, and you know how they did it? By using their imaginations. To quote my comfort movie, End of Evangelion, imagination is the power to create your own future, and that's just what my Toqgers did. Think about episode 46, for example. The future the Toqgers want is one where they're fighting alongside right, no matter what the cost may be, and by imagining it, they make it happen. As Toqger's theme song says, even in times when you feel like giving up, if you just imagine, then nothing will be impossible. Toqger's whole team is so good too. Kagura ended up being my favorite and also my daughter, but this whole team is awesome and their relationship with each other means the world to me. It's been a little bit more than a decade since Toqger aired, but I have no doubt that these 5 are still friends somewhere in the multiverse. They'll always be together. Toqger does such a good job of setting up and then displaying the bond the team has with each other. It makes the ending few episodes an emotional roller coaster, and all of a more heartwarming moment when they find Right again. It's not like the characters are lacking as individuals either. I love Right and how he'd pretty much do anything for everyone else's sake despite his childishness. Tokachi is such a fun loser to make fun of, and the plot with his brother made me cry. Mio also had family plot that made me cry because I'm always weak for stories about fathers and daughters. Hikari is a very nice voice of reason while not being so unrealistically mature that it's not believable that he's a kid, and also, why does his character song mention Right? You guys ever think about that? Green-Anger literally goes, if Right is the one that lights up the future, then Hikari is the one that lights up the present, and what? What is up with that? And Akira! My favorite harmonica-playing cat-loving monster who just wants to protect rainbows. I love him. He had episodes that made me tear up too. But like I said, my favorite Toqger is easily Kagura. Just going, I'm strong, I'm strong, I'm strong, I'm strong. Doing whatever task, girl! Can pretty much give me the ability to do anything. She's clearly terrified of fighting, and you can read her as being pretty insecure, but her imagination and her love for her friends is so powerful that she figures out how to do it anyway. I'm proud of her. The side characters are also fun, with Wagon being my favorite staff member because I get this. This too is gender. But the conductor and ticket are real ones as well. And I'm not gonna shout out the antagonists because the Shadowline are all really fascinating characters, especially Zed. I love a tragic villain, and Zed wanting to sparkle like Right, even though he can't, makes his eventual embracing of who and what he is hurt. But he's still scary despite that tragedy. Like, this dude was brutal to Greta and Schwartz. You still feel bad for him, but at the same time, wow, this dude is super evil. That can be a hard line to straddle without a character coming off as too sympathetic. In the very same year that Toqger aired, they accidentally made a villain who's kind of more right than the hero, so props to Toqger for not messing that up. As far as Toqger's music goes, my god, that theme song! It's one of my favorite Toku intros of all time. You can tell because I covered it for my YouTube channel and you can watch it right now. I love it so much. It just hypes you up for this train journey. And Toqger's character songs are really good too. Choo Choo Wagon is super catchy. I obviously love Sanjo Narikiri Girl because it's my daughter singing it, and I know I talked about Green-Anger already, but why does his character song mention Right? Why is his character song about another man? Why does it premiere in the episode that's all about their, relationship? Toei, if you would like to explain that to me, leave a comment. I know you're watching. I also really love Toqger's line change gimmick. While I know it's the bane of Ranger Key Collectors' existence, it just gives me the image of, kids playing pretend and switching roles while they do so, which does in fact fit perfectly for this team. And Tokyu's mecha! I love Tokyo. Just seeing the cockpit makes me smile like an idiot. Build-A-Dio is also really cool, and when these two trains come together, gorgeous mech. I don't care what anyone says, look at her. She's beautiful, she has a lance! So to wrap this up, I also want to add that Toqger is very much a comfort series to me. I feel like I can turn on any episode, and even if I do end up crying, it'll turn into happy tears. This journey that my beloved train kids go on is one that had me hooked from the moment it started until the moment it ended, and I love revisiting it as much as I loved watching it the first time. If you haven't seen Toqger, I implore you to check it out, and I also hope that you skipped this section because I guess you now know the big reveal. But it won't make the rainbow line any less fun to ride.
Number 2.
I watched this season of Kamen Rider in May of 2023. I knew I was gonna love it. I didn't know it was quite literally gonna change my life. but sometimes the story of a homeless man, the gay bird he falls in love with instead of going to therapy, and the sister he ends up adopting along the way just hits you exactly right. And that is why my second favorite tokusatsu series of all time is... You count the medals 1, 2, and 3, life goes on, anything goes, coming above! What do I even say about Kamen Rider O's? If you've watched O's, you love O's, and if you don't love O's, you haven't watched it yet. From an objective perspective, I firmly believe that it's better than my number one pick. It's the perfect balance of episodic writer shenanigans and serialized writer pain and agony. I also think it's the perfect place to start with Writer because it's like a crash course into everything that makes Writer so much fun, and also so painful. As you can probably tell by the fact that I just talked about Toqger, I'm a huge fan of Kobayashi Yasuko's writing, and I really do feel that O's is her magnum opus. I haven't seen every toku show she's written yet, but you gotta admit, O's is pretty hard to top. Although this may be a weird thing to start this section on, one thing I really love O's for is that it's one of the best depictions of depression and PTSD that I've seen in media, like, ever. Eiji is traumatized, he's depressed, and he acts like what actual people suffering from those conditions are like. When you've been through that much, you just kind of find a way to deal with it. I also really like the conclusion O's comes to is that not having any desire can be just as destructive as wanting too much. Neither of those extremes are healthy places to be. You have to want things for yourself, but wanting too much won't make you any friends either. And speaking of wanting too much, this might come as something of a surprise, but I really relate to Ankh and the Greed as a whole as characters. They're one of the most tragic monsters that Writer has come up with, in my opinion. They didn't ask to be made or made incomplete. They experienced the world in a different way through no fault of their own. There is a void inside them that can never be fulfilled no matter how much they try. In episode 46, when Ankh's explaining just what it's like to be a Greed, I was like, oh! Being neurodivergent can feel like that sometimes. And the characters learn to love him and treat him like a person anyway, though we'll have more on that later. His sense of style is everything to me as well, and Ankh being an 800-year-old bird monster who happens to be possessing a male body gave me the words I needed to describe what I have going on gender-wise, so thank you. But Hina! Oh, Izumi, Hina, the female lead you are. I think Hina should really be given more credit, cause she handles the insane situation she's found herself in with way more grace and poise than I ever could. If a gay bird possessed my older brother, well, that'd be really funny actually, but also incredibly stressful, and growing attached to said gay bird while still wanting her older brother back makes for such an interesting conflict. She's not involved with the fight itself, it's true, but that doesn't mean her presence isn't vital to Ankh and Eiji's stories, so shout out to my girl. And though I did talk about Eiji as a character a little, my dear friend Kyle predicted that I'd be absolutely obsessed with Eiji, and he was right. He was very right. I love a nice boy Kamen Rider protagonist, but I also love a guy with a tragic backstory that spurs him to be a hero no matter what the cost may be, and if that ain't my boy, he no Eiji. And that isn't even it when it comes to Oza's characters. Date Akira has the honor, I guess, of being the one secondary writer who deals with his crush on another man in a normal way. Goto-chan is my favorite wet poodle, Chiyoko is the mom friend we all need, and Satonaka, I am free on Thursday night. If you see this, please contact me and then we can hang out on Thursday night when I'm free. And I'm not gonna talk about O's without talking about Ankh and Eiji as a ship, cause, of course I'm gonna talk about Ankh Eiji. My least ship-brained friends love Ankh Eiji. My IRL, who has seen 4 episodes of O's at the time of me writing this, gets Ankh Eiji. I actually first met these two before I watched O's in Heisei Generation's final, and my reaction was, quote, have known the two guys from O's for one scene of this movie, and I think they should kiss. And you know what? I was right. They should kiss. They have earned their spot as the most popular writership on AO3, and I'm proud to have contributed to that. What starts as reluctant partnership turns into codependency, and what continues as codependency turns into a real bond, and that makes Ankh's eventual betrayal so painful, and what makes his sacrifice to give Eiji a fighting chance hit not one, but several kicks directly to the face. To me personally, to love someone is to help them live, right? Ankh reminded Eiji of what he wanted and brought it to him, therefore helping him live, and it's thanks to Eiji and Hina that Ankh didn't just disappear or cease to exist, but died, which is proof that he lived. It's just really beautiful to me. O's also has one of my favorite suits in Kamen Rider, Tajidor combo. Red and black is a color scheme that I always love, but also she's just so beautiful. I also really need to talk about Ozu's music for a second. Anything Goes is such a good OP, and I always yell along to the shouting parts when I rewatch random Oz episodes, which is often. The insert songs are also crazy good. I cannot believe they had a 19-year-old in the studio making Power to Terror, and I'm a firm believer that Right on Right Time is super underrated. And oh my god, time judged all. Though it's not my favorite gay Kamen Rider duet, my god, I can't not give credit where credit is due. And the 10 years after version? The lyrics? Jesus Christ, why did they do that? Some of us are fragile. So, to wrap up this already extremely long bit of this video, Oz is so perfect that I almost think it's kind of difficult to talk about. I mean, that didn't stop me, but what is there to say that hasn't been said? I loved Oz. The character, the story, the themes, all of it worked perfectly for me, and it worked perfectly for everyone else too. So what could possibly beat it? What tokusatsu series could own my heart further than this one did? What on earth could be first place? Well, before I reveal my number one favorite tokusatsu series of all time, I'm going to shout out every season of tokusatsu that I've seen and loved that just didn't make this list. So here's a bunch of honorable mentions.
Honorable mentions.
Kamen Rider Double just barely didn't make this top 10. It's genuinely an amazingly written season, and it also has one of the single worst guys that ever happened to me. But on the real, I love Double very much, and all of my love to Futo City. Kamen Rider 01 has a lot of flaws, and the unfortunate luck of existing in the first half of 2020. That being said, it has Fua, who is a bit like if someone looked at a list of traits that exist in characters I love and started checking things off. So I really do love it. My stupid dog is there. And it's almost strong enough that I can ignore some of the ickier bits. Kamen Rider Blade is a show I'm still too sad to talk about. Call me back in 3 to 5 business years. Bye. Need therapy? Pick any Forze 2-parter. Actually, need therapy? Just watch Forze. I also feel like Forze is super accessible if the only other tokusatsu you've seen is Power Rangers, so if you are a PR fan who wants to get into Rider, check out Forze. Need therapy? Kamen Rider Ghost. It's the only life you got, so you gotta live it big time. This one's also not as bad as everyone says, by the way. And Wizard is also in the therapy category. But they're like a therapist who has a really good shrooms guy or something, you know? Because it's kind of like you're on drugs, but they are drugs that make you feel better. Lupin Ranger vs. Pato Ranger is actually the first tokusatsu show that I watched live. That wasn't Power Rangers, I guess. I did this out of developing a crush on Kudo Haruka, and to this day, I still have a crush on Kudo Haruka. Also, Kairi is LGBT, he kissed. Ultraman Blazer was the first Ultraman I watched live, and it's the only one that I'd finished at the time of me writing this script. I was just like, well, Warabi no Tomoya is gorgeous, so I'll check this out. And then I love this show. I cried so much. Blazer, my beloved. The ending made me sob. Family. You know? Ultraman Arc actually finished just a few days before I started filming this video, and I do wonder what this list would look like if it had finished sooner. It genuinely felt like Tsubro had a bug in my walls and designed a series to make me go insane. And it worked. So yay. Chosei Kantai Sazer X is a show that made me feel a lot more things than I thought it was going to, and I don't just mean the confusion that comes from Miura Ryosuke as Kane, who's just adorable. If you like family, and God knows I do, check out Sazer X. And rest in peace, Robert Baldwin.
Okay, Kancho.
Venturing over into the western side of the fandom for a bit, I'd like to say that Jungle Fury is genuinely, really, really good. And the theme song is straight up one of the best pop-punk tracks I've ever heard, and I've heard more pop-punk than most people have heard their names. I'll let Jack take care of this one. Jack?
Of course you fell for Levi stock footage, man.
Thank you, Jack. My son is in this. My girlfriend is in this. My boyfriend is in this. And so's my good friend Daiki. My girlfriend is in this. My son is in this. Nothing but respect for my 2022 Kamen Rider. And lastly, a special shout out to Power Rangers Ninja Steel. Yes, it's Power Rangers Ninja Steel, but it's really special to me. And the version of it that I made up in my head at age of 18 is really, really good, you guys, I swear. You just gotta really get deep into Brody's trauma and Levi and their relationship.
Number 1.
So, if you know like a single thing about me, it's what my favorite tokusatsu show is. If you watch the second sentence of this video, you can probably tell what my favorite tokusatsu show is. If you have two eyes and go to my Twitter profile right now, you can tell. You know. And you might think, wow, because this is the case, I have no respect for this person's opinions anymore. And to that, I say, totally fair, dude. Just leave then. No amount of public opinion can sway what I feel for this season. It's the reason I can make this video that you're watching right now. It saved my life. There is nothing else that could take this top spot. In first place is, of course, Kamen Rider Revice! Yes, that's right. Kamen Rider Revice is the favorite tokusatsu show of the guy who's known for loving Revice a lot. If you're shocked, you must be new here. Revice is so incredibly special to me for so many reasons. I wouldn't be here without it. It's like, you ever just fall into the right thing at the exact right time and you got there based on like a really arbitrary decision, but you look back on that choice and you're like, thank God that's what I did? Yeah, Revice is that for me. I know Revice gets a lot of flack. I know that while watching it live, some of the pacing was kind of though I also believe that if you aren't watching it week to week, those problems disappear completely. I know it's a lot more character-driven than a lot of people like the writer to be. And yeah, I know that a lot of really awful behind-the-scenes stuff made a lot of people not give Revice a real chance. And I acknowledge all of that. Alright? It still saved my life. It still has themes that resonate with me to an insane degree. It still has lessons I'm trying to keep myself practicing. It has Igarashi Iki, whose existence is something I'm just so goddamn grateful for. That's why I married him. There are so many wonderful things in this show. For starters, Revice is about self-love. I mean, it's pretty obvious considering the fact that the three main characters are quite literally dealing with their inner demons, but to vaguely quote, "love yourself" from the Live and Evelyn Demons V-Cinema, you have to face your inner demons to grow. You can't repress the sides of yourself that you don't think you need, or that you dislike, or that annoy you. They're a part of you too, and the only way to deal with them is to acknowledge and learn to love them too. When Revice aired, I'd spent a lot of time repressing a lot of stuff, and thanks to Revice, I looked into myself and faced those things. And then, you know what happened? I became a stronger person. It kinda sucked, honestly, but I'm glad I did it, so thank you, Revice, for that. Another thing about Revice that makes it extremely important to me is that it's family-themed. I always say that my taste in media is child of divorce, and man, this show's running theme of family and all the shapes familial love can take is like cocaine to me, basically. The Igarashi family is everything to me, obviously, and I like how much stronger they become as a unit because of their experiences, including ones where they're fighting each other. And as a guy who's weak for brothers, the Iki and Daiji storyline was what really got me hooked onto Revice entirely. I like how Yukimi and Genta's relationship is explored in Revice Legacy, and how the Igarashi family's shared type of animal they found on the street is shown in Sakura and Hana's storyline. I truly believe that Sakura and Hana's plot is the best that has been given to any female writer in the franchise's history so far, and even if you're someone who doesn't really like Revice, you can't deny that much is true. I love how Hiromi basically becomes Daiji's second older brother, and how he learns to be a hero while not pushing himself over his personal limits, and the stuff with his mother and Dear Gaga is just waterworks. I even love the George Juga stuff. I know it gets a lot of flack, but familial relationships are complicated, you know? It's entirely possible to have a parent who didn't treat you well and still want to have a relationship with them. And if that person dies before you can fix said relationships, yeah, that can lead to some bad choices. It's a lot more complex than people give it credit for. Even Hikaru, who is a tree I've grown slightly more fond of after seeing Okutomoya in another project, still has a great story about how family doesn't just mean the people that you're related to. And this is gonna sound kinda weird because it's very much not an aspect of Revice that I usually see get talked about, but there's very much a message about how cults prey on the vulnerable and how evil that is in Revice. We have Julio, who was full of regrets and had lost his friend. We have Oltega, who was escaping from an abusive environment when he was approached to join the Deadmans. And Hana, heartbreakingly, was born into this cult. What's more vulnerable than a baby? If these people had had the help they needed when they needed it, they'd probably live different lives, and there's a really poignant tragedy in the fact that they didn't get to if you think about it. And I had spent a lot of time in a cult-like environment before Revice aired, so... As I'm sure you already know, my favorite Revice character is our primary writer himself, Igarashi Iki. He means the world to me, and also he is my beloved husband who I love so much, and guess what? He loves me too. You can tell from very early on in Revice that Ikki isn't the type to draw attention to his own needs. Anyone else would probably be freaking the fuck out if a demon started quite literally whispering in their ear, but Ikki's first move is to just brush it off. When Daiji's showing clear signs of being weird as hell during the Igarashi family's hot springs trip, Ikki can tell. He just doesn't say anything because he doesn't want to disrupt the peace. Hell, even in the flashback episodes about why Ikki quit soccer, which have really, really important character things for Ikki if you ignore the elephant in the room, by the way, you see he's the kind of guy who will work himself to death for a dream that isn't even fully his. There are 2 times, 2 of them, throughout the entire canon of Revice where Ikki admits he's struggling. Once is to a guy he's about to kick the ass of until he explodes, and the other is to a disembodied voice in literal hell. My Ikki shoves down a lot. And that's where Vice comes in. It's true that Vice can come off as annoying, and he's certainly an attention hog, because Ikki doesn't think he should want attention. Take the hot springs example I mentioned above, for example. Vice is suspicious the whole time and trying his best to get Ikki to acknowledge that. Or look at what happens after Hiromi dies. Ikki is stoic, but Vice is sobbing his eyes out. This of course comes to a head in 2 of my favorite Kamen Rider episodes ever, 17 and 18. Ikki spent all this time trying to be a hero because he's trying to figure out what his purpose in life is. It's the only value he sees in himself. So when he can't do that, it quite literally sets him on fire. And then here's Vice, who's all of Ikki's selfishness, ego, unexpressed needs, and desires, as annoying as he, and those things, might be. And guess what? He, and all of those things by extension, are a part of Ikki too. It's being reminded of that lets Ikki use Volcano, and it is glorious when he does. Now, that doesn't mean that Vice is perfect. There was probably a better solution to Ikki's overexertion playing soccer than having a metaphor for trauma-induced memory loss happen, though I also really appreciate that because, hi, I've had some of that myself. But self-care isn't easy, and neither is healing from burnout. To me, at least, it makes sense. Even at the very tail end of Revice, Vice is looking out for Ikki. He promises that he'll give Ikki a happy life, and he knows that Ikki's gonna live a happier life if he has his memories of his beloved family. But that doesn't mean Ikki's fully satisfied, because Vice is a part of that family too. In my man's own words, he is happy, but not as happy as he could have been. As difficult as it is for me to praise Kamen Rider Geats in any way, I have to give Ace credit for giving Ikki his memories of Vice back. I really want him to be happy. But Revice is like full of great characters, full of them. Sakura is my second favorite, and you can't not love Lovecoff while we're at it. But for real, Sakura learning to accept what she considers her weaknesses, and those being the exact things that make her strong, is a really motivating message. I'm glad they gave that to a character, and I'm glad that character is a woman who gets a fair amount of focus. Daiji's storyline didn't resonate with me as much because I was too busy resonating with Ikki's struggles, but his has a really good message too. To paraphrase Key, erasing the dark parts of yourself completely won't make you perfect. Holy Live isn't really perfect. It's all white, but that doesn't mean it's Daiji at his best. It's only through accepting your darkness that you can be whole, which is how we get the It's Daiji's final form, and it's awesome. Hiromi, our beloved henshin failure uncle, is sometimes described as the most Kamen Rider character in Revice, so of course I'm fond of him. And the demon suit, oh, it looks gorgeous on him. And of course, as someone who loves Kamen Rider, I love George. There is a George in all of us. There's definitely a George in you if you've gotten this far into the video. And I could go on for hours about this, but there's so much more Revice to talk about. You know how I'm always weak for an anniversary season? I love how Revice does its anniversary stuff. I think that Vice stamps are an insanely fun collectible, and I really want to get all the ones for every season of Kamen Rider I really love. And the way they're used is so much fun too. I love how George said, "Wow, you're gonna go fight your younger brother? This is just like Kamen Rider Gaim." Or how the Excite Vice stamp turns Vice into a skateboard. I love how Genta's backstory is such a brutal take on the classic Ichigo origin story. I love how Ichigo himself is there, played by Fujioka Maito himself. He has his father's eyebrows. I also love the spin-offs and extra content. Legacy and Dear Gaga will beat your heart up and then put it back together again. Girls Remix is awesome, and my wife is in it! Poppy is there! Revice has Poppy! Amazing! The Mystery also has some really fun cameos, and, guess what? Tape from Tosation Gransazer! Shoulda so chucked, bro. But Beyond Generations is really something special. It has such a beautiful combination of Revice and Saber's themes, and the story will make you cry. I'm not gonna say that Revice has my favorite theme song because that would be a blatant lie, but the soundtrack is so strong in, like, every other place, it doesn't even matter. Promised by Dice is one of their best tracks, and it's perfect for the movie it's attached to. Without You, the ending theme from The Mystery, is a beautiful, beautiful duet, and the Hear Me solo version from Dear Gaga is great too. Riot in Bloom is a banger, George Karizaki's writer system is like the alphabet song to me, and Mirage Mirror is crazy impressive from a technical perspective because duetting with yourself is hard, yo. I'd know. I've done it. Go With the Flow is a lot of fun. I don't think anyone has ever called the Igarashi siblings the Boiling Soul Brothers, but it is fun to say. Love Yourself, which I mentioned before, is one of my favorite comfort songs. And if I ever need a really good cry, Kimi wa Sono Mama De is there. As far as suits go, Revice has awesome suits, and great belt noises too. I love every Revice suit, obviously, because my Iki is under there, but Barrett Rex is my favorite suit ever. There's just something about this eggy boy that is satisfying to my eyes. Ultimate Revice is gorgeous too, I don't care what anyone says. And that's not mentioning Juga, or Evil, or Demons, or the Daiji one, or Veil, or Jean. To finally wrap this up, Revice took me out of a really dark place, and then it ended up crossing over with that dark place in a way that wasn't really avoidable. At first I was honestly really scared. The idea of this thing that gave me a reason to keep going until the next Saturday night, combining directly with something that caused me a lot of pain and trauma, gave me a lot of anxiety. But now I can watch that content without any fear. It's a testament to both how much I've healed, which Revice was instrumental in, and how much I loved Revice that I can say that. I also have to credit it for reactivating my latent tokusatsu brain cell. This list would be a lot shorter if that hadn't happened. I don't feel this way to be different. If anything, it's kind of tough loving a season that's as controversial as Revice is. But I hope that if you haven't seen it, you give it a genuine and honest shot with your whole heart. And if you've seen it and you didn't like it, I hope I managed to change your perspective a little. There's nothing that could possibly be my favorite series aside from Revice, and I don't think it's gonna change anytime soon. So, and now that I have blown through any cred that I ever had the illusion of having, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, but of course, no pressure. And I will be back with my regularly scheduled covers soon. I also have a really, really good idea for another essay, and I think that if you didn't like this one, you're gonna hate this next one even more, so look forward to it. And until then, bye-bye! Ichigo, Nigo, V3, Rider, Man, X, Amazon, Stronger, Rider, Super 1, Z Cross, Black, RX, Shin, Z, O, J, A! But I didn't know it was gonna fuck. I did know it was gonna fuck. I think it's really interesting that Toqger and Gaim aim together. Aimed? And that lets you get to be as cruel as you want without fuck. So, to wrap this section up, I still fuck. So, yeah, that going for me.